You fought for your creativity throughout your career. Challenges. Were there any battles? Were there any Were there any battles that you would fight differently? Now.
No. I don't.
Or you would fight them the same way.
I don't really look out. I mean, the only real big battle I've had was the Brazil battle, which was it's one of those high points in your life, and you don't want to go back to that ever again. But to be that naive, that ballsy, that arrogant, that stupid, all this is really important to do it because, with Brazil, 20th Century and Universal made the movie. 20th Century released it in the world, no problem. Universal saw the movie. I remember being out in LA at the Universal, at the Alfred Hitchcock screening room, as a matter of fact. And we showed Brazil to all the top executives. And towards the end of the movie, I went up into the projection booth and peered out through the little projection hole to see how they were reacting. And I saw all the backs of necks with the tendons, the muscles all constricted red. And they're just, I didn't have to hear the noise. I just knew what was going on. And of course, they all came out afterwards saying, absolutely terrific, Terry. But you're fucked at that point. It's all over. And in fact, it was. Basically, they saw something extraordinary, and yet it could be improved and reach a much larger audience. And that was the problem. So you get in this conversation with, say, Sid Sheinberg, who was the head, who literally liked so much of the film, was impressed with a lot of it, but that unhappy ending and these confusing fantasies, if we just simplify it, you would reach a much larger audience, Terry. And he couldn't understand that I didn't want a larger audience. I didn't care what size the audience was. I just was interested in telling the story that all of us who got involved in that film, from De Niro, Jonathan Pryce, we all agreed to tell that story. That's the story we're going to tell, and no other. And so that was where the battle began, and it was just so odd that they couldn't understand that a larger audience wasn't as important as telling the story properly and correctly and not cheating. And of course, after that, it got fun. They put an embargo on. We couldn't show the film in America. We couldn't even get a PR company, a public relations company, to help us fight this system. And it was a ridiculous situation. So what one has to do when one deals with the great system, the corporation, is get personal. It's the only way. Because Sid was hiding behind that, or bearing the responsibility of corporate responsibility. He was the man and had behaved like a man. And there was a lot of macho-ness floating in the air. But it was corporate responsibility. And I was an ingrate, irresponsible, out of control, just had made that film. And so the producer Arden Milson said, well, we've got to get some lawyers and fight. I said, no, we don't have the money for lawyers. We don't have the time, because the film out before I die. I thought it was like, and so it was just that simple ad. I mean, some of you probably know it. I mean, Variety, which is such a beautiful magazine, because to see on one page that many zeros and numbers counting the millions that every film is taking at any particular moment. Cleaned that page up, put a nice black border around like a funeral announcement, and that blank white page with a polite and decent question asked, dear Sid Sheinberg, when are you going to release my film Brazil? Signed, Terry Gilliam. I see nothing wrong in that. I think it's a decent question, and that's when the shit hit the fan. Of course, because you don't do that in Hollywood, and it only happened because I didn't care. I had no career. I didn't want a career. I didn't want anything except to get that film out as we made it. And the whole thing went on, and it got very funny because Sid was trapped, unfortunately, in this world of corporate responsibility and adulthood, where he had to talk solemnly. And I don't know, some of you must know this stuff, but Jack Matthews, who was a journalist for the LA Times, got a dialogue going between me and Sid. Sid and I never spoke again after the early meetings. And Sid would say something responsible and corporate, and then Jack would ask me, what do you have to say? And I would say something silly. And then he would throw that back at Sid. This went back and forth. And it was kind of a losing battle for Sid in one way, because he was the giant and I was David. He was Goliath. He was corporate, I was the artist. So for the public, it was kind of a losing battle, you could argue, except the public doesn't read Variety. That was the only problem. But a few read the LA Times, and the thing grew. The moment that I loved the most is when Maria Shriver, soon to be Mrs. Arnold, was doing Good Morning America on ABC. And my good friend Joel Siegel, who was the movie critic there, he organized Maria to ask for an interview with Bobby De Niro and me. Now, De Niro at that point never promoted his films. He did nothing. He wouldn't do interviews. But, and this is the great thing, and this is the important thing, is his loyalty to the project. That was the important thing, that he cared enough to go on national television to support the film, not me, the film. And I sat there waiting for the interview with Bobby to end, which was quite quick. Because, she would ask some very intelligent question, and he would say, yes, or no. That was a choice. I just went on, and then she realized, she turned around to me and said, now, Terry, I understand you have a problem with the studio. I said, no, I don't have a problem with the studio. I have a problem with one man. His name is Sid Sheinberg. And I whipped out an 8x10 glossy of Sid. I rushed the camera and held it there for millions of Americans to see my enemy. Now, that is very confusing to a leader of a corporation. And it went on. It went on. And the victory in the end, because it was a victory, is that people of the LA critics discovered that in their bylaws, the film didn't actually have to be released, since it hadn't been and wasn't about to be. And they voted they did their vote that year. And that year, the big film of that year for Universal was Out of Africa. Here in New York was Redford, Meryl Streep, Sid and all the Universal board, and all in their black ties for the big dinner. And the LA critics' vote came in. Best Picture Brazil, Best Director T. Gilliam, Best Screenplay, and what the fuck is this? And that was exactly what happened. It went crazy, and they had to release it. And because the little battle had reached at least to New York and LA and maybe Boston and Chicago, they put it into those cinemas first. And there wasn't a poster, they had a Xerox copy of the artwork that the poster was going to be, were it ever released. And they stuck this Xerox copy outside the cinemas. Over the Christmas, it did more business per seat than any film in these very limited number of cinemas. And in their wisdom, they realized they had made a big mistake, and Brazil was a great film, and so they released it wide in all these cities across America that knew nothing about this and had no intention of going to see a documentary about Brazil. And it flopped, totally. But, I mean, and that was my naivety and arrogance, I suppose, and fun, to be honest.